Kristi Noem stepped into the committee hearing room with the air of someone expecting just another political photo op. To her, this was routine. Another evening session on agriculture policy, a subject she'd mastered well enough to toss out sound bites with practiced ease. The room was dimly lit, the hour late, and most reporters had already packed up for the day. But in one corner of the chamber, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat quietly flipping through a slim set of notes. Her expression was unreadable, her focus intense. Unlike many in that room, she hadn't come to posture or perform. She had come for answers. For Jasmine, this hearing hadn't felt routine at all. Something about the guest list had been bothering her from the beginning. Kristi Noem was no longer an official member of the Agriculture Committee, but she'd insisted on being present, under the vague banner of concerned interest. Her arrival, as always, was polished, blazer-pressed, hair immaculate, and a carefully calibrated smile that signaled professionalism but kept distance. As Noem began to speak, most members let her roll through her remarks without interruption. She spoke the usual lines about American farmers, national security, and foreign interests. The words were familiar, almost scripted, and a few committee members even nodded along. But Jasmine Crockett didn't look away once. She had heard things, rumors that Noem had been quietly taking meetings with global agribusiness lobbyists and softening her stance on foreign land ownership. Until recently, it had all been hearsay. That changed last week. A former campaign staffer, someone Jasmine barely knew, had reached out through a trusted mutual contact. The message was short but potent. You're one of the few people who still care. Attached were 2 files, just enough to make Jasmine dig deeper. And now, as Noem continued talking, Jasmine's silence wasn't passive. It was focused, fueled not by vengeance, but by conviction. Farmers in Texas, Iowa, Missouri, people Jasmine had met and spoken to, were being misled, and she wasn't going to let it continue. When Jasmine finally leaned forward to ask a question, the energy in the room shifted. It wasn't dramatic, but enough that phones lowered and eyes lifted. Her voice didn't rise. She didn't accuse. She simply asked, Representative Noem, can you clarify the nature of your March 3rd meeting in Des Moines with Mr. Henrik Staller of Agrosin International? For just a second, Noem blinked, her smile twitching. Then she replied, I think you're mistaken. I wasn't in Des Moines on March 3rd. Jasmine nodded slowly, almost as if she anticipated that answer. Then she reached for a different folder, thin and black, the one that had remained untouched until that moment. Flight records show you landed at Des Moines International Airport at 10:12 a.m. that day, she said calmly. You stayed at the Marston Suites until March 5th. There are surveillance timestamps from the hotel conference room showing you entering with Mr. Staller and 2 lobbyists from the Landshare Investment Group. Silence fell like a blanket. Noem's smile faded for a second before she pulled it back, tighter now. I'm not sure what documents you think you have, Congresswoman Crockett, she said, her tone defensive. But I caution you against referencing unverified material in a formal setting. But Jasmine didn't raise the binder or wave any papers around. She didn't need to. They're verified, she said simply, and they're being reviewed by committee staff as we speak. A low murmur rippled through the chamber. Noem shifted uncomfortably, glancing at her aides. One of them looked visibly shaken. The committee chair, sensing the tension, tapped the gavel and called a recess. Jasmine leaned back in her chair, her face composed. She had done what she came to do, but she also knew this was only the beginning. After leaving the chamber, Jasmine didn't head straight home. She returned to her office, kicked off her heels, and sat down at her desk. The Capitol, though never truly silent, felt hushed at that hour. The soft hum of a vending machine and distant footsteps from janitorial staff made the building feel like a different world. Jasmine liked those late-night moments. They gave her space to think. Her chief of staff, Lauren, poked her head in. Phones are ringing already. Media wants a statement, she said. Jasmine shook her head. Not yet. Let them wonder what else I've got. Because the truth was, she had more. Much more. The documents Jasmine had brought to the hearing were just the tip of a much larger iceberg. It had all started with an encrypted email from an anonymous account 3 weeks earlier. The contents were shocking. Scanned itineraries, internal memos marked "Do Not Distribute," and detailed summaries of off-the-record meetings between Kristi Noem, foreign investors, and private donors tied to agricultural consolidation. At first, Jasmine thought it might be a hoax. Fake documents weren't rare in Washington, sent by angry citizens or anonymous trolls. But something about the language, formatting, and timeline felt authentic. To be sure, she reached out to someone she trusted in cybersecurity. They confirmed everything was clean. Nothing had been altered. Then Devin Grant called, a former low-level staffer on Noem's campaign. Devin wasn't high-ranking, but he had a reputation for being observant and discreet. "I saw what she's been doing," he told Jasmine, "and you're the only one I think will actually do something about it." When she asked why he chose to speak out now, his answer was direct. Because the people she claims to protect are the same people she's quietly selling out. Devin explained how Noem had helped kill legislation that would have assisted small farmers recovering from drought. At the same time, she'd slipped language into another bill, almost invisible in the fine print, that gave tax breaks to companies buying up U.S. farmland. Many of those companies were backed by foreign capital. Jasmine didn't leak the files to the press. She didn't even notify party leadership. She built a small, trusted team. Lauren, a legal advisor, and a former colleague from her public defender days, who now worked as a committee staffer. They double-checked every document, every itinerary, every email, and every name. As they connected those names to campaign donations, the picture became undeniable. Noem's campaign had taken money from firms poised to profit from the very legislation she was championing. Some donors were new. Some PACs had been formed just months earlier, with vague mission statements and suspiciously similar addresses. Jasmine didn't think in terms of political strategy. Her thoughts went to the farmers who showed up at town halls, who just wanted a fair deal. People who believed their elected officials were standing up for them, not cutting deals in hotel conference rooms while speaking platitudes back home. By the time Jasmine Crockett sat across from Kristi Noem in that hearing chamber, she understood exactly how much was at stake. She knew the moment she spoke, the landscape would shift. And she also knew what would come after. The backlash, the questions, the attacks. But she didn't flinch. Too many had stayed silent for too long, hiding behind political etiquette, while real families suffered. Now, ready or not, Washington was going to hear the truth. And Jasmine wasn't backing down. There were some things no press conference could spin, no statement could erase, and no denial could bury. For all the theatrics of politics, one truth remained: the paper trail never lied. And that trail, once hidden away in digital dust, was no longer forgotten. It had been retrieved, examined, and now rested in the hands of someone who wasn't afraid to strike the match. Leaning quietly against the doorway of her office, Lauren gave a quick glance at Jasmine. "The phones are ringing already," she said, voice steady. "Media's asking for a comment." Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. "Not yet," she replied calmly. "Let them wonder what else I've got." And she did have more. A lot more. What had been presented in the hearing was only the beginning, the tip of something much heavier. Jasmine had held back, not because her remaining evidence was lacking, but because it was too powerful to use all at once. She wasn't interested in a quick political jab. She was playing the long game. In her desk drawer, locked tightly, sat 3 red folders, each marked by hand with a specific date and location. These weren't just about Kristi Noem showing up at private events she'd claimed never existed. They were about who she was meeting with, and what they were saying behind closed doors. The first folder was labeled June 12, Dallas, Texas. A private dinner, discreet and carefully arranged. Noem had attended under a false name, Kay Naylor, at an upscale boutique hotel in downtown Dallas. Among the guests were 2 executives from an international firm that had recently been denied a farmland acquisition in Oklahoma. Jasmine had every piece of it documented: receipts from the restaurant, valet stand security footage, and a confidential hotel invoice. Interestingly, that invoice had been amended 2 days after the dinner, her real name added back into the record. The second folder, October 3rd, Atlanta, Georgia. A real estate summit held with no public coverage. No press, no photos. Noem had appeared as part of a closed-door panel with representatives from a UK-based land investment trust. A draft of her private remarks had accidentally been sent to one of her staffers' inactive email accounts, and it was that very inbox that had been part of the leak Jasmine received. In the draft, Noem praised new models of shared ownership between American growers and global financiers. On its surface, the language was harmless, but in context, it was a roadmap for foreign companies to quietly fund and indirectly control American farmland, bypassing laws that prevented them from owning it outright. It was a loophole dressed in patriotic language. The third folder was the most volatile. December 8th, Miami, Florida. A secluded weekend retreat hosted by a vague nonprofit that had no clear mission, no active board of directors, and was now quietly shut down. But Jasmine had followed the money. Financial records showed heavy contributions to this nonprofit from private equity firms with direct interests in food production and agricultural exports. Even more damning, donations traced from the same firms to a brand new super PAC backing Noem's future political ambitions. All technically legal, but politically, morally, it reeked of betrayal. Jasmine's phone buzzed nonstop that weekend. Reporters were circling. Whispers were flying. Some members of Noem's own staff had gone quiet. Others, caught off guard, reached out off the record, asking variations of the same panic question. How much do you think she really has? But Jasmine's camp didn't leak. There was no chaos, no media stunts. That was intentional. She didn't want drama. She wanted precision. For her, this wasn't about scoring points or camera time. It was about families, real people, in rural communities watching their land, their futures, swallowed up by corporations and foreign entities. Farms turned into assets, communities into statistics. Late one night, Jasmine met with her communications director and her legal advisor. Together, they mapped out the next step. A slow release, timed for maximum impact without making it look like a publicity campaign. We do it by the book, she insisted. No spectacle. They decided the emails would be next, but not leaked to the media, and not through a dramatic press conference. Instead, she would formally submit them to the House Ethics Committee. That way, the issue couldn't be spun as a smear. It would be on the record, official, unfiltered, and real. By Monday morning, the submission was complete. It included internal emails between Noem's office and a private agricultural consultancy known for lobbying foreign interests. Among the attachments, scheduling requests, redacted for personal info, but clear on content, and payment notes with names unblurred. There was a memo, too, outlining policy alignment goals, with proposed wording for upcoming agriculture bills, phrased specifically to avoid triggering alarms over foreign influence. It wasn't hearsay. It wasn't a guess. It was timelines, flight itineraries, names, and direct quotes. That afternoon, the chair of the Ethics Committee, who had previously remained silent, issued a public statement. We are reviewing newly submitted materials concerning Representative Noem's conduct and her financial associations with outside entities. Our responsibility is to assess whether these interactions violate House rules and public trust. Noem's team. Silent. Completely. And Jasmine knew exactly what that silence meant. She leaned back in her office chair, massaging her temples for the first time in weeks. For so long, this evidence had been hers alone to carry, to protect, to guard. Now it belonged to the public. Now it was bigger than her. By Tuesday morning, the tides began to shift. National media anchors, who'd barely spoken her name days before, were now quoting her directly. Headlines changed. Cable news panels were discussing the blurry lines between foreign partnerships and foreign manipulation in U.S. policy. But inside the Capitol, everything was still too still. Jasmine knew this phase well. It was that strange purgatory, the awkward pause between impact and response. Too quiet to be dismissed. Too tense to be ignored. She kept her schedule light. No cable hits. No rallies. No victory laps. Drawing too much attention now would let critics paint her as a showboater or someone looking to build her personal brand off a scandal. That wasn't her path. Instead, she kept working quietly with her legal aid, her policy team, and a small trusted group. Because now, the leaks had been verified, and more tips were pouring in. Former staffers, ex-donors, even a retired aide who had once worked with Noem back in her South Dakota days. That aide, he had records, itemized lists of gifts, trips, consultations, none of which were ever disclosed publicly. Jasmine's office didn't rush to confirm anything. They listened. They logged. They verified. One detail at a time. The pressure outside kept building. But she didn't flinch, not even when a close ally of Noem's cornered her in a hallway, speaking in a patronizing, low voice. "You're smarter than this," he said. "You don't want to burn everything down. Just let it pass." She looked him in the eyes and offered a tight smile. "You know what's smarter?" she replied. "Not underestimating the people who trusted me to speak for them." He didn't reply. He just turned and walked away. That night, Jasmine got a call she hadn't expected, from Congresswoman Darlene Monroe, a veteran from Michigan who had served long before Jasmine ever thought about running for office. "I've seen this kind of thing before," Monroe said. "People get away with it because no one wants to pull the thread. You did. Just don't let it tangle around your own neck." Jasmine sat at her kitchen table, phone in one hand, staring out into the city night. Her voice was steady. "I'm not backing down." "I'm not asking you to," Monroe replied. "Just make sure you know who's really standing behind you when the lights get brighter." The second hearing wasn't just another political formality. It was the moment the stakes rose for everyone involved. Kristi Noem sat at the witness table, surrounded by aides who looked more like a legal team than a political staff. Cameras zoomed in from every angle, capturing even the slightest twitch of discomfort. The room had an unnatural stillness, broken only by the occasional murmur from reporters or the click of pens against notepads. Jasmine Crockett entered quietly, without grandstanding. Her eyes scanned the room, noting how different it felt this time. This wasn't just about optics anymore. It was about accountability. She took her seat with calm purpose, her binder thicker than last time, its edges marked with color-coded tabs. Behind her, staffers whispered updates. News networks were already running live segments. Social media hashtags were trending, and Noem's approval numbers were beginning to dip. The committee chair called the session to order. Noem raised her right hand and was sworn in. Her voice was steady when she began, but the words felt rehearsed, filtered through legal coaching and PR drills. She insisted she had always operated within the bounds of the law. She dismissed concerns about her meetings and financial links as misunderstandings, exaggerated by political adversaries. But Jasmine didn't flinch. When her time came to question Noem, she didn't rush. She flipped through her binder, pulled out a document, and calmly laid it on the table. It was a memo, one of the ones she had submitted to the House Ethics Committee the week before. It detailed a conversation between Noem's office and a foreign agriculture lobbying firm. Jasmine didn't even read it aloud. She just slid it forward. "Do you recognize this?" she asked. Noem leaned forward, scanning the page. Her fingers curled slightly at the edges. "I'd have to review it more thoroughly," she said. "I'm not sure of the context." Jasmine nodded. "You will. It's part of the formal submission now. The committee has the full thread, including your scheduling team's responses and the attached draft bill proposal." There was a pause, short but sharp. A few committee members exchanged glances. Noem didn't look up. From that point forward, the hearing took on a different tone. Jasmine didn't have to raise her voice. She didn't need dramatic gestures. She let the documents speak, one by one. Meeting logs, donation receipts, confidential memos that never should have left private inboxes. She referenced the red folders by date, but didn't reveal their contents yet. She didn't need to. Their very mention was enough to keep Noem's team on edge. Outside the hearing room, the media frenzy exploded. News outlets that had previously brushed off the story were now dedicating full segments to it. Analysts debated whether this would derail Noem's political trajectory. Editors scrambled to verify the leaked materials, but Jasmine had already made sure everything was airtight before going public. Her team had worked around the clock to verify every source, redact sensitive identifiers, and double-check the timeline. The Ethics Committee released a brief but firm statement by the end of the day. They were expanding their review. That single line sent shockwaves through Capitol Hill. Lawmakers who once aligned with Noem began issuing cautious, noncommittal remarks. Some even canceled joint appearances. Back in her office, Jasmine reviewed her notes with her chief of staff and legal counsel. They had expected pushback, but instead, the silence from Noem's camp was louder than any rebuttal. There were no countersuits, no rebuttal op-eds, no witch hunt pressers, just quiet meetings behind closed doors and whispered rumors about internal investigations. That week, tip lines set up by Jasmine's office received an influx of messages, many anonymous, but detailed. A former campaign staffer shared records of flights paid for by a third-party agriculture PAC. A local journalist from South Dakota forwarded an unpublished story he'd shelved years ago about land acquisitions that were now eerily relevant. Jasmine's team didn't react impulsively. They cataloged everything, organized it, verified sources. They weren't just building a scandal, they were documenting a system. And amid the chaos, Jasmine never lost sight of why she started. This wasn't about political revenge. It was about the rural communities being hollowed out by invisible deals made in boardrooms thousands of miles away. It was about protecting land, food, and people. Every document she presented, every question she asked, pointed back to that. By the end of the week, the public narrative had shifted dramatically. It was no longer about whether Kristi Noem had made poor choices. It was about whether those choices had endangered the integrity of American agricultural policy. Even lawmakers who had once dismissed Jasmine as an upstart were now meeting her gaze with caution and, in some cases, respect. One evening, long after the building had emptied, Jasmine sat alone in her office, a cup of cold coffee by her side. The city outside buzzed with late-night traffic and headlines still scrolling across giant digital screens. Her phone vibrated, an encrypted message from a contact confirming that another set of documents had been authenticated. She exhaled slowly. It wasn't over. Not yet. But something had shifted. A staffer popped in with a soft knock. "CBS just ran your line about patriotism and loopholes," he said. "They're calling it the quote of the week." Jasmine smirked, but said nothing. The work wasn't done, and she didn't need applause. What mattered now was momentum, and she had it. The paper trail was no longer hidden. What had once been buried in dusty folders and anonymous leaks was now out in the open, and Jasmine Crockett was holding the match. Lauren, standing in the office doorway, gave her a look that said everything. "The phones are already ringing," she whispered. Jasmine didn't flinch. She simply shook her head. "Not yet," she said. "Let them wonder what else I've got." Because, in truth, there was plenty more, and she had no intention of stopping here. Kristi Noem's office responded by the end of the week. The statement they issued was bland and predictable, full of empty accusations about political games, baseless outrage, and smear tactics. But behind the scenes, it was different. Jasmine could feel it. Panic had started to seep in. The public hadn't seen everything yet. Not by a long shot. Jasmine had held back the strongest parts during the hearing, not because they were unconvincing, but because they were too powerful to burn all at once. She was thinking long-term now. This was a campaign of attrition, not a knockout blow. Inside her locked drawer sat 3 red folders, each one marked with a date and a location. They weren't just proof of Noem attending off-record meetings, ones she had publicly denied. They documented the details. Who was there? What was said? And why it mattered. The first folder was dated June 12th, Dallas, Texas. It described a private dinner at a boutique hotel downtown. Noem had attended under the alias K. Naylor, listed on hotel records. Seated around the table were 2 executives from an international firm that had recently been blocked from acquiring farmland in Oklahoma. Jasmine had all of it: restaurant receipts, valet stand security footage, and a hotel invoice with Noem's real name quietly added to the guest list 2 days after the dinner. The second folder was dated October 3rd, Atlanta, Georgia. It detailed a private panel appearance by Noem at a real estate conference. No media was present. The panel included representatives from a UK-based land investment trust. Jasmine had received a leaked email, forwarded accidentally to an outdated staff inbox, that contained a draft of Noem's remarks. She had praised new models of shared ownership between American farmers and foreign investors. The language was polished, patriotic even, but in context, it outlined a model where foreign corporations could influence vast tracts of U.S. farmland without ever officially owning them. A legal loophole hidden in patriotic language. But it was the third folder, dated December 8th, Miami, that hit the hardest. The retreat was hosted by a now-defunct nonprofit with no transparent mission, no board of directors, and a web of dark money funding. Jasmine followed the money. The nonprofit's financials revealed heavy contributions from private equity firms tied to food production and export infrastructure. The same firms had donated to a newly formed super PAC, quietly aligned with Noem's rumored future campaign. Jasmine's office didn't confirm anything. They just listened, logged what they could, verified what they had to. The pressure from the outside world built daily, but she didn't blink. Not even when a Noem ally cornered her in the hallway. He leaned in with that familiar condescending tone, whispering, "You're smarter than this. You don't want to burn everything down. Let it pass." Jasmine's reply was calm, firm. "You know what I think is smarter," she said quietly, not underestimating the people who trusted me to speak for them. He didn't answer. He just walked away. That night, Jasmine received a call from someone she hadn't heard from in years. Congresswoman Darlene Monroe, from Michigan. A seasoned veteran in the political trenches, long before Jasmine had entered office. "I've seen a lot of these," Monroe said. "People get away with things because no one wants to be the one to pull the thread." There was a pause. Jasmine looked out at the city lights from her kitchen. "Well, I pulled it," she replied. Monroe didn't disagree. "Just don't let it wrap around your own neck." Jasmine nodded slowly. "I'm not backing down." "I'm not asking you to," Monroe said. "Just know who's really standing with you when the next wave hits." And Jasmine knew. This fight was far from over. But now, it was no longer a secret.